welcome to this evening's presentation brought to you by Trade with Precision and AtFX. So we're going to be talking about some advanced MT4 topics. The first thing that I need to do is to go through a couple of disclaimers. And I can tell you a little bit about myself. I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to ask questions, type them into the questions box, and I'll get to them as quickly as possible. So a little bit about myself. I'm a fund trader in London. I'm a swing trader, which basically means I trade on the daily or 4-hourly or weekly, occasionally, but not very often on the 1-hour time frame. I can trade the lower time frames, but I generally have settled on a lifestyle of trading the higher time frames. I'm a trend trader, which generally means that I'm trading only really the markets that are trending the most on the daily time frames. And if you're interested and we have time, I will take you through some of the charts that I'm actively participating in at the moment. So that really gives you a little bit of a background about me. So I don't spend a huge amount of time trading per day. It's anywhere from 30 minutes to 90 minutes at most. And I do it on a number of platforms. So I do use MT4 as well as a few other platforms. I've also developed a few algos, or MT4 EAs as they're known, expert advisors. And these are usually just for bread and butter and really ways of converting some of the trading techniques that I use into sort of automating those processes. So I'll take you through that. And again, wanting this to be as interactive as possible. So the agenda for this evening will be exploring the open source third-party customer indicators and how to install them. Also an introduction into expert advisors, which is its own universe, so to speak, and have any of your questions answered in real time by myself. And also just an introduction to AtFX, if you're not familiar with AtFX. So usually at this point, I'd go across to the platform, and we'll come back to these slides towards the end in terms of why choosing AtFX. And can I do a very quick survey? Just can I get a sense of anyone who's listening in this evening who's attending the webinar, how many of you have actually used, who's brand new to trading? So in other words, who's really in their first 3 months of trading, who's brand new to MT4, or who hasn't used MT4, just so I can get a sense of the experience of who I'm talking to and how much I kind of need to expand on my explanation. So if you can give me a sense of it, especially those who are brand new to this entire process, that would help me a lot. Because obviously it may just so happen that you found yourself, okay, there we go, okay, fine. So there are a few of you, and that's all relevant for what we're going to be talking about. So what I've done is I've loaded up the MT4 platform. There's MT5 and MT4. It's a standalone charting platform. Now there's MT4 and MT5, and the thing is that MT4 is historically more popular. There's just so many more people using it that they're very reluctant to move onto the new, more up-to-date, multi-threaded version, which is MT5. And there's a little bit of overlap. Basically, what MT4 have decided to do is effectively update MT4 and ultimately bridge it across to MT5, because they just can't seem to get anyone to move without the effort. So the platform you're looking in front of you is then the platform of choice for AtFX, who's the broker, and it's a very, very simple, easy to use platform. Excuse me. Very simple, very easy to use, and really in the sense that it's almost like, if you are familiar with cars at all, we now have most of our cars are, at least if they're not electric in terms of the motor, they at least are, there's a lot more computing and electric gear inside the car. So back in the day, the car of choice was kind of more mechanical, and they had ways in which they could always be fixed or patched up. So people like the Land Rover as well, for example, it almost never used to break down because you could always patch it up, and it was all made up of physical components. And then since they've become computerized, now of course if your car breaks down, you need to call for help, or it's not necessarily as easy to fix. So sometimes simplicity is better, and so MT4 is a very simple platform to use and quite reliable in that sense. So the layout here, you could change and mix up the colors as you want. On the left-hand side will usually be accessible. These will be the symbols that I can trade, and there will be a list of those symbols that I can then access from AtFX. And if they are grayed out or silver, then I have not included them in my list. So usually what I do, this is my personal preference, is go through and only activate the ones that I want to be using to be trading and add them into my list. So the more I have, it will chew up a little bit more bandwidth and therefore performance, but not badly. On a normal computer, it should be fine. But I still feel that if I'm not going to be trading something, I'd rather not have it impact my platform at all. So therefore, I only activate elements in gold that I'm looking to do just by double clicking on those. And so there'll be a few items here. For example, I don't trade the Chinese index. I do trade Australia, so I've only added those in. And here we go. So then I'll get a list on the left-hand side that I can then access, and I can view it in a chart in various different ways. I can obviously go through and open up a chart via the menu. I can also go through this icon here and click and open up a chart as well via this menu. I can also right click on a chart here and open up a chart. So this is what MT4 does. It's usually a very limited number of things that you can do, but they are repeated via a drop-down menu or via another menu over here. So basically it'll be the same actions repeated over and over again. It's kind of difficult to break the platform because it only has so many things that it can do. It has specific timeframes that we can look at. And so as I said, I'm a swing trader. I'm usually looking at the daily timeframe. And also if I hold my mouse pointer over certain elements, I can, it'll give me a pop-up helper and tell me what that is for. So I'm just going to adjust this, which gives me a little triangle at the top where I can adjust, just pull price away from the edge. I don't like it when it's right on the edge. So all of this really meaning that I can obviously edit the colors, I can do what I want. So I'm just, for the benefit of those of you who are new to trading, giving you a very quick rundown of it. Windows can be open and closed. For example, I can remove the currencies over here, just switch them on, switch them off. Also the accounts details on the left hand side. There's also a terminal, which is if I'm going to trade, this is where my trades will show up in terms of open trades. So at the moment there are no open trades on this account. It's certainly for demonstration purposes, but this is where I would then have open trades listed, so I can hide that. That's a terminal. I also have a strategy tester, which would then I could use to do a lot more back testing if I wanted to. And I could explore certain robots if I was so inclined. So you can kind of switch them on and off as you please. And also if I right click on the chart, I can also access certain things. So I can switch the grid on and off. I could change time frames. So it's basically a repeat. And so if you are a beginner, this is really a great platform from that perspective because there's only so many things that you can do and you can learn them very quickly. So it is possible to get someone up and running on this platform within an hour, even as little as an hour or potentially more. So and then of course then starts the task of actually trading, which is a different kind of sort of a different concept. So the other thing that I want to do is just quickly change this. There are a couple of presets in terms of going on a lighter background. So I could, for example, switch to a lighter background here. It's a lot more, it's a lot brighter. Obviously, I can jump between candlesticks if I'm so inclined. And so have a look at that data. And so what I'm going to do is still go back. It'll be slightly not as bright if I change it. Go back to black. And I can change the colors of certain elements here. So I can have a red bar. I can have a green candle, a red candle as well. So just change those and go and have a look at these and just kind of I want to put the chart on the foreground. There's a couple of items here, candlesticks. Let's have a look at that. So there we go. This gives me a sense of what I'm looking at in terms of price. And I can also jump through various items here. So look at the FTSE 100 right now. And that gives me a sense of price action. And I can change to the different time frames. Okay, so usually once it's downloaded the data, it'll trade. It's pretty quick in terms of the speed and performance, and it works pretty well on pretty much any kind of laptop or computer. So I'm running this off a laptop at the moment. And then, but it's also very simple in terms of the way that it behaves. For example, here I'm going to draw in a horizontal level. So let's say that I go in and place a horizontal level. If I want to edit it, I can right click on it and edit those properties. But what I was going to say is because it's such a simple platform, whatever settings I change in here will then become the settings going forwards. So basically then every line or everything I draw would be working this way. If I draw on a trend line, it's currently red. If I decide to go and edit it and I decide to change that to, let's call it an orange color, then now any other trend lines I draw going forwards will, if I draw them in, they will also be that color. What's going on here? Okay, so they'll stay that color, and so it will, in effect, go that way. I can access all the objects that are listed here, all the things that I've drawn on my chart. So what I'm going to do is just tick a few of these items here. I want to get rid of all the trend lines, just delete them. So I'm just going to delete, delete, delete. And the other thing that's interesting is if I do decide to drag and drop another element onto this chart on top of this one, it will leave the horizontal levels that I drew in the charts, but it will replace the price action. So there we go. There are the original levels. And so generally the way that I prefer to work is I will always create a separate chart with the horizontal levels for that specific instrument, and that's it. And I won't swap them around if I'm going to draw aspects on them. So we have all the tabs at the bottom. I can jump through various items. I can also create a template in terms of colors. So I've got white with indicators that are default with indicators. I've got various colors. I can just assign that, and I can create as many of those templates. I can also save a layout. So I could change different layouts. If I go through to the market overview, it will actually change the layout. If I go through to, say, the default or British pound, that's what that layout looks like. I can change those layouts and come back to this panel as well, for example. And then a couple of other items. If I can close those tiles, and if I need to, I can often reopen them. So it will be located there in case I accidentally deleted it. And then, of course, if I double click on any of these tabs, it will put them into sort of a particular layout. So either I can look at each one as a separate tab. So again, if I just double click it, now it puts them each on a tab in that sense. Or if I have a particular layout, so I'll just get rid of this window. But if I click on this, I now have a specific layout. But it has to be manually done. And it is something to be aware of. It means that in this case, for example, if I wanted to look at a different item here, I would then have to put it in each of the charts. So I'd have to put Euro GBP in that chart to look at it on the weekly chart, drag it and drop it into the weekly there. So this one I'll make a daily. And then this one will be, say, for example, a monthly time frame. Okay, so that one at the bottom will be a monthly time frame. And so what's happening here is I have to drag and drop that information into each one. So that can be a little bit tedious, but this is more for the analysis and so on when going through that. So this has got an indicator on it that I'm going to just remove, which is the pivot points, and remove that. So there we go. This is looking at it on the daily time frame on the left-hand side, then on the weekly at the top right, and then on the monthly on the bottom right. And so I can have these different layouts and adjust those. I can also use an automatic layout over here in terms of these windows and have it automatically done, which I don't really want to do now. I'd rather just store it as is. And so what I often do is tend to work with just a single tab, because I find it a lot easier to create a single tab for everything and just create that. So an example would be that I want to have a look at some of the markets. So what is trending at the moment? Let's have a look at gold. Gold has been performing really well. So is oil. So there's some really good. Let's have a look at oil. Oil looks fantastic. So let me show you. I'll take you through the process of how I would go about taking advantage of this on the platform. And then we'll have a look at how we would go about adding indicators and potentially how we would explore some of the other tools that are available through the through the link on the website. We'll go to it and have a look at that. Okay, so this is now having a look at crude oil, but I want to change the default template. So I've created one here with indicators. So I'm just going to change it to that. There we go. It's just updated it. And this is US oil. Now it's, I want to go and have a look just in case there are any others. If I go and have a look at the symbol, I can see which commodities I have any access to any of those. Those are the two, so that's what I have. Now, in principle, price is heading on upwards, and it's trending very, very nicely. So some markets are not trending very well, and some markets are trending very well. So let me see if I can find something that's not trending at all. And so what I'm going to do is look at the most recent 10 to 20 candles to determine if a market is currently trending. So in this example, in this example here, price is trending lower. It's clearly moving. Now price is starting to trend higher. Gold is very similar. If I switch over to gold now, you can see that there's a very, very, very nice trending to the upside. Okay, silver is not as clean. The trend is not as clean, but it is generally climbing higher. It's encountering some clear resistance here. But these are the kind of charts I do want to be looking at. Let's have a look at some charts and just see if any of them are not trending. Okay, so this one's a great example of something that is not trending very well. And what I want to do is just show you it by highlighting that area. So what I'm going to do here is right click and just edit this little menu up here. I'm going to customize it. I don't use the equidistant channel, so I'm going to remove that. All right, I don't really use text labels. I'm going to get rid of that. What I do like to use is to draw certain shapes. So I'm going to take the rectangle and move that across to this side, and I can also move it up or down. You'll see it's now showing up in the menu there. So that's all good. I'm very happy with that, and I'm going to now what I'm going to do is just draw to highlight that if you look at price where it is now, price is not going anywhere. So there's no money making opportunities in this case because there is a strong battle going on between bulls and bears. Some people might feel they need to trade the Euro Aussie for some irrational reason because right now it's not trending. It was trending in the past, it was trending higher, but now it's consolidating. And so it's higher risk to trade this because there's no clear direction on this market. What I want to do is pick markets that have a very clear direction. And again, if we go and go back to that US oil, you can see that this one actually does have a clearer direction. Its behavior is also a lot smoother and it's tending to trend up higher. So this would then be on my watch list for entry opportunities into this trend. So one of the ways in which I would do this is try to identify key levels where I can get in, where the market's potentially going to come back to. And you can see if I look here on the most recent price action, there's some strong support levels. That's not bad. But what I'm really looking for is something above that because price is going to come back at some point. This is not really a bad area, but there's some very odd kind of things happening there. So I'm just going to zoom out and see if there's any other levels I need to be paying attention to. You can see that that level is definitely significant on the lower one, and the higher one has got one up there as well. There's also another one just above it. So that's fine. Occasionally there will be levels that are close to each other, and we can see that these overlap. So that's fine. It's up to date. I'm keeping it very, very simple. What would be the next level above that would potentially be up here as well, and there might even be one a little bit lower. Let's just have a look and adjust it down to about there. Let me just check that. Okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that. So now that gives me a sense of these are the price levels I need to be paying attention to right now around the market. The trend on the daily is up. I can look for entries on the 4-hour time frame or potentially on the daily. There's also right here on the 4-hourly is actually a little bit of a level of support that's actually not bad, and prices just pull back into that. So if I got a bullish candle here, I might be tempted to get an entry and go long here, and I can see how much potential profit there is on this. And this already starts because I've picked a trending market. Okay, so this is talking about manual trading. I'm just going to mark the level that I've drawn in differently because let's just have a look here. Why won't it let me change this? What's going on? There we go. Just going to change that so that it looks slightly different to the levels that I had in there. Okay, that's very hard to see. Let's just do it like this. There we go. Can I make it thicker? Will they let me do that? They will. Nope. Okay, so you either have it solid or not. All right, so that gives me a nice little level where potentially a nice bullish candle here will let me get in, and there's some potential profits on that trade before we get up to the next level. The overall trend looking very nice. If I go back to the daily, it's just that little level there. I prefer on the daily actually to be getting in somewhere in this area. So I would mark that as a preferred area to be getting in on the daily, but on the 4-hourly, there is a possibility for an entry here. Okay, so that's how I'd go about doing that as an analysis on the daily time frame. Oil looks very good for that, and I can quickly take you through gold as well, and then I'll go on to the different indicators. So what you've seen me do so far is change the color layout, how I've added symbols. I haven't really accessed anything over here. I've got the accounts. I can have multiple accounts that I can access. One of the dangers, though, of this is we can, as users, we can actually install multiple copies of MT4 onto our laptop. So if, let's just say for some reason I had 3 different AtFX accounts, the smarter thing would be probably to install 3 copies of AtFX MT4 onto my machine and log into each one would have a login to each of the accounts. Instead of, I do have the ability here to log into multiple accounts from within one copy of MT4. The problem is that sometimes I might be using a robot or might be doing something in one account, and as soon as I log into the other account, the first account is now no longer running. The robots or systems might now be running on the new account. So basically anything that I do in this then suddenly translates through to the new account. So that can be a bit dangerous. So, but the point is I can log into multiple accounts. I can access indicators here on the left-hand side. These indicators are also accessible through the menu up at the top. So again, it pays for anyone who wants to play a bit with MT4 to just look at things, just click on things, just play with it. There's very few ways to do anything wrong. And just to play with it. So indicators that I can access here, these are default indicators that come, and expert advisors at their simplest are really just robots that we can play with. There are robots out there that can be purchased. There are free ones that can be shared, and not only just robots that might trade, but also indicators. So I might, for example, want to find a particular indicator, and I can go ahead and see how to do that. So there's 2 sort of robots in here at the moment, and then there are scripts as well. So the difference between them is indicators are usually things that I can drag and drop onto my chart that I will see there, such as moving averages. These are indicators as well. Horizontal levels, sure, but Fibonacci would be an indicator. Okay, so that would be an indicator as well. These are indicators, RSI, MACD, any of those would be considered indicators. A script might be a once-off thing that I need it to do, and usually it won't be something you can see on your chart, or it would be just be an action that I ask it to do. So it's very rare for most people to use scripts. It exists, but it isn't. I mean, I never use scripts, but I have in the past. Let's say, for example, I had someone who said, I've got a tool that will extract this data and then then export it out of MT4, I don't know, so that you can import it into Excel. That's an example. And so they would create a script that I would run that would gather the data and export it. Okay, as opposed to an indicator. Indicator will sit on my chart the whole time. So I can see items here, for example, and then have a look. So if I want to go and see what's a zigzag, if you're not familiar with a zigzag, it's an interesting little tool. Drag it and drop it, or double click it. So I can do either. That was dragging and dropping it. I can also double click it, and it will assign it to the existing chart, and I can look at common things. We don't need to know about these 2 tabs, generally speaking. And then we can have a couple of inputs that we can edit later, and we can comment on the thickness of those. And actually what I'm going to do just for fun is change the color here to something more recognizable. So perhaps sort of a dodge blue, and see how that looks. Now I'm going to say okay, and that will just generate the zigzag on my chart. Okay, so that's an example. And I can either, excuse me, either access that through the list of indicators. And if I want to edit that, there it is. There's my zigzag, and I can edit it. Or I can right click on it. So most of it is pretty easy to do. If I right click on the indicator, sometimes it's confusing it. There we go. So now I can right click on that indicator there. Come on. There we go. So that's part of the reason why I sometimes go to the indicators thing, because trying to right click on this thing can be a nightmare. For example, here you can see, okay, if I right click, I can get access to those properties. I'm trying to do the same thing with this indicator. Nope, doesn't want to recognize it. Okay, so in this case, if it won't recognize it, I'll just do it this way. So I'm going to delete that indicator, and what I'm going to do is also I'm going to show you how I can go about online and go find indicators that I want. So what I was going to say, that will do for now. That's kind of all there really is. Obviously, I can also trade on a few items here, but the way in which I would usually do it is go to the new order tab up here, so that, in other words, I don't want to make mistakes. I want to do it carefully. I would open up an order window here, and then I would make sure, this is very important because this can happen on this platform, make sure that I have the correct symbol. Usually, whatever chart you have open, that will be the one that it will trade. It should open up, but I just check that as a habit. Volume. Now, how many of you are not, and there's no judgment or anything, how many of you are familiar with lots, mini lots, or micro lots? Just give me a sense of that. Have you heard of those? Are you familiar with them? Just to give me some sense of how much I need to explain that. All right, so, okay, good. All right, now, so basically lots, mini lots, micro lots are the equivalent, or in terms of trading amounts, as similar to the analogy I always use, or the comparison is, say, kilograms, milligrams, and grams. It's just a set of units that we use. Generally speaking, a lot is generally is considered $10 US per pip. And that would be called a single lot. 0.1 would be known as a mini lot, which would be a dollar per point or per pip. And then micro lots would be 0.01. So that's usually the lowest we can go as a micro lot. And usually that would then be about 10 cents per pip. Okay, which would then change depending on the currency of the account. So usually in this case, depending on what that exchange rate is between the US dollar and sterling, this might be in the UK something similar to closer to sort of 8p, 7 or 8p per pip. So generally speaking, I'll work off that as a round number through the US markets. And so it's very rare for traders to be using very large volumes like this. We're usually using mini lots or micro lots. And those are quite important. On occasion, if we click on a particular item, the specifications for that, if we need to find out more about it, we can see what it allows us to do. So in this particular case, just stretch that out a bit. The smallest volume step we can do on that is 0.1, minimal volume. So what that means is if I want to trade this, the smallest size I can trade is actually a mini lot, not a micro lot on this window. Okay, so that just gives me a sense of that. Also tells me how much margin is required. Whereas generally with currencies, almost always you can trade smaller amounts, okay, micro lots. All right, so they are lower risk in terms of the smaller size that we can do. So that would be the amount that I need to risk. There's also my stop loss, which has got to be put in, my take profit. Usually I have to decide if I want to get into the market live or with a pending order. Okay, so live or with a pending order. With a pending order, I'm either going to be using a buy limit or a sell limit, or a buy stop or a sell stop. Okay, so those are different types of entry opportunities. That will be the entry price that I put in, and whatever that is. So let's say that I want to get in if price goes above 58.75. So that will be, my price would be, and I would do that actually as a buy stop at 58.75. I could also say if it doesn't do it within a certain period of time, I could have that cancelled. And what I may do to keep my head clear, or just to make sure that I know what I'm doing, for example, is put that in as US oil buy, okay, or long order as an example. So then I can see what it is at a glance. It's a comment, and that'll be the amounts. I'd also have to put a stop loss in. So I might say, well, if it goes below 51.50, I want you to get me out. So that would be my 51.50. And of course, I would want to take profit at, say, 66. These are just exaggerated numbers to highlight that example. And that would then be a way in which I could have that set. So that allows me to create those orders and place them. What is going on? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. Should be fine. Okay, it's not allowing me to replace that order right now. I'm not sure why, but it's probably because it's of the account. So that's one of the ways in which I could do that. If I now wanted to go and find additional indicators online and to add certain things, there are ways in which I can do this. Two approaches would be to do, if I just go through to Google, I can actually just do a search for MT4 indicators, for example, and there are other sites other than the official site. So what I've got, and I will send this to you as well, is this is the link effectively for the official sort of site, and I'll post that in case you need it. But if I go and click on that, I can then go to the official sort of MQL is actually the language that coding is done in MT4. So the application is known as MT4. The coding language is known as MQL. So there are obviously hardcore programmers out there that can build and write their own tools, and there are people who cannot code at all, and you are not expected to. And there are people in between who guess they just decide to learn how to do basic coding. So this can all be done. And looking at them here, we can see whether they're sorted into experts, indicators, scripts, or libraries. However, it's really worth my while mentioning this at this point, that a lot of the content that is uploaded, certainly for free, not so much indicators, but certainly with trading robots, a lot of it can be, it's not junk, but it can be just low quality stuff. Okay, it might be school kids messing around creating an EA, as opposed to something incredibly advanced. And so the burden is going to be on you as the user, or me as the user. We need to determine, you and I would need to determine if this can be used profitably. So we need to be educated in that sense. We have to understand if we want to use an expert. So I'm going to start off here by doing a quick scan of indicators, which I want to have a look at. And there are various items here, and some of them are very cool. And it usually helps if we know what it is we're looking for. Okay. So then we know where we're going with it. So pivot points, I want to go ahead and I want to find myself a pivot point indicator and then bring it in. So there's a variety of these, but also they've got ratings, which is quite good. So we might be interested in those. And this one looks pretty good. I can also download it. So the actual elements that I'm going to install, this process is quite simple. This process is relatively simple. The process of finding it and testing it or installing it is actually the easy part. Really, it's just that there can be a lot of stuff out there that might not be the thing that we necessarily want to use. So let's just say that I want to use this because I don't always like the pivot points that come with the platform. So what I'm going to do is right click on that and just go save link as, see if it allows me to do that. And then what I might have, for example, is a folder. Maybe I have a folder where I can download apps to and then save those from this. So this one would be AtFX, and I'll just call it webinar, and that will be my pivot points indicator that I'm going to save to that folder. The thing is that I actually have to load it into MT4's folder. So what I'm going to do here is just get me the folder here. And there's this little item here. And what I want to do is to put that into the platform so that I can access it. So it will show up in my indicators here, but I need to put it into the indicators folder. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just hide those currencies so that this is open. And you'll see that there's actually a couple that I've been playing with. There's a couple that I've played with here. I've got a new one that I want to add in, which is the one I've just downloaded. And what I'm going to do is throw it in here. But there's a very specific folder where this needs to go. Okay, and so the way that we access this folder is through the open data folder from the drop-down menu, file, and this is the open data folder. This is unique to each MT4 installation. All right, and it's usually, so the best way to find it is through this rather than through the browser. Once I click on that, it will open up this particular installations, which has a code generated, and it will open up that specific folder. So because it's MQL4, because you saw that we were looking for stuff, it's always going to be inside this MQL4 folder. I'm going to do this a couple of times to show you this. And inside that is really where all the magic happens. These are where I can store my experts. You can see that if you look here, I've got a MACD and a moving average. Those are two expert advisors, two robots effectively. If I go into my experts folder, you will see there's the MACD and there's the moving average. So I'm now operating within these folders. And I can see the items there. But I've downloaded an indicator that I wish to put in here. And it's pretty cool. I mean, I could go ahead. There's nothing stopping me from creating a folder if I want to. So let's just go ahead and let me just go and add a new folder. All right. And I'm just going to call this Adams Indicators. Okay, so I'm inside there. I want to create a folder and I want to put this indicator in there. And this is actually really not a bad idea. Organization and filing is very good for us because the problem is that once we get access to these libraries, we might end up wanting to try 50 of these different indicators and realize that we actually only like 5 of them. So the problem is that because we just threw them into the same folder, we end up slowing down our MT4 application, clogging it up with junk that we ultimately don't really want to use. So whereas if we put them into folders, it gets easier for us to find them down the line and clean them up and remove them if we don't like them. So I want to put it into this folder. And what I'm going to do is just open up the folder where I saved it. and I'm just going to copy that and paste it into this folder. So it's now in that folder. Now, all I have to do at this point is, it hasn't shown up here, my folder isn't here either, is if I right click and click refresh. So once I click refresh, what should happen is a folder should show up here with Adam's indicators, and inside that should be the indicator that I want. Is everyone, can I do a quick check? Is everyone following me so far? Does this make sense? I will repeat it again for those of you so you can see me do it at least twice, but does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to right click on this and click refresh, which is going to then introduce. The other thing that should not happen with MT4, almost never, is it shouldn't crash. Because it's such a simple application and it's easily 10 years old, it's pretty much bug-free, Obviously, introducing elements from websites that I download in a way is like adding apps to Chrome, or these things we used to add into Facebook. They can introduce bugs, but generally speaking, the existing code should be very stable. So now you can see I've got a folder here called Adam's indicators. If I expand that, you will see there is the pivot point indicator that I want to use. So just what I'm going to do here is drag it or drop it or double click it, put it onto the chart. Let's have a look at it. It opens up. It's pretty cool. I've got support resistance, pivot color. I'm a big fan. Historically, I'm a old-fashioned. That is the color that I usually have for my Deep Sky, and resistance to me would actually be red, because that would be the ceiling where I'd be selling, and support from underneath would be green. So for me, that would actually be that. Interesting. So that's what I would prefer to do. Let's have a look at that. Those are the variables, no colors, and that's it. And run it, and let's have a look. There we go. So I like that. That is there's my pivot levels. What I'm going to do is remove the other things on my chart. Just get rid of those temporarily. Blah, 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 blah. Objects list. These are my horizontal levels, the lines that I drew in. Just delete, 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 delete. And my rectangles. Are those mine? I think they are. I think. There we go. Oops. Okay. So there we go. So there's my pivot levels. Those are pretty cool. And I can probably edit those individually, but okay, cool. And there we go. We can also use those. You can see that interaction with that. By the way, if you're not familiar with pivot levels, they're pretty good. They still, traders still use them. They're very good for trading below the daily timeframes as well. But yeah, and again, here's another reason why this might end up going long from where it is because it's sitting on a pivot level as well, a central pivot as well. So there's a lot of reasons why the market might go long on the 4-hourly before heading lower, but just commenting on those. What's interesting is that, can you see the text up here that says uptrend? I find that very interesting, because it's telling me that there's an uptrend, which there is, but it's interesting that it's observed that. I didn't know why it would do that. All right, so that, and also if I go back to that website, it also does say that there it says downtrend, so that's interesting. Okay, potentially that's how it does it. Okay, so if I want to go see it, there's a particular page. I can go to a discussion on that, which will be a separate tab. So I'll just open that up here. Separate tab, and then I can ask questions, obviously, if the code is still around, or how to use it, or if anyone has done it. But it seems at this point it's very, very simple. So that's how I would use that to go ahead and create a simple additional indicator, which I can then put into it. I always recommend that I put my own indicators in here. There's also a possibility that you may want to remove these indicators, and sometimes the way that I do that is I would simply just put them into a folder as opposed to deleting them. And then it removes them, but also just in case I need them, I can get back to them if I want to. So that's pretty cool. And so that's how I might go about doing that. The next stage would be if I wanted to go and find myself an EA or a robot. And so there's two kind of paths to that. And this one is in itself almost worthy of a program or a course in terms of really mastering backtesting, which is the process of testing and qualifying a robot to run forwards. Now, so the first thing I would do is I would need to have an indicator on a robot on the chart. So there's an expert advisor, and I could potentially run that. So I've got a couple of different ones that I can use here. And what I might decide to do is to see if I can get something profitable out of this system. So if I just bring up the screener, so I'm going to do this very briefly and show you this process. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell it to, okay, we're going to use tick data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something. I'm on oil, so I'll go through to US oil. Just check that it has, is going to use the data that I have. Let's just see what I've got here. US, all right, so let's use light is WTI, which is Brent. I've just got rusty. Let me just do this one. WTI oil is Brent. Let's just see if it is. There we go. Just had suddenly had a blank. Actually sweeter than Brent, therefore it is okay. Sorry, let's go back and let's use this one. Light. There we go. So I'm going to use that, and what I'm going to do is I want to test a very specific period just to demonstrate this. I'm going to go back here to February. So I'll bring it up to today, and then I'll just change it back to, let's say, 2018. Where we're at now, this is on the 4-hour time frame. So actually, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Go back to, let's go back to 2019. Let's go back to the 1st of January, and we'll have this up to today. So this will be my period over which I'm going to try to develop settings that will hopefully do well for me. I've got a 1-hour time frame, so that might be the way to go, or potentially let's call it a 4-hour time frame. And I've got the moving averages here. And so what I want to do is to use the system. Let's just say, for example, that I get rid of these two indicators. This is an example. I'm doing this very, very quickly to introduce this. Let's say I've got these two moving averages here, and basically I wanted to buy when the 10 crosses over the 2, and I wanted to sell when the 10 crosses below the 2. So I would then go into my settings for that robot. There we go. And I've got lot sizes. So this one, unfortunately, I can only do 0.1. My maximum risk might be a percentage, for example, but also my moving period would be a fast and a slow one. So my these are different settings that I can then play with, and I'm going to have a look at that. I also, let's just go and have a look at this, need to start it off with a certain amount. So I'm going to use a $10,000 US account. This is just to show you the introduction to this and how I can then go about finding some EAs. Usually I'd want to have a spread that I can put into this. The spread will usually be quite low. And let's just have a look and see how this runs, if it does actually run. I normally don't run it from the backtesting that I do. I don't run from this AtFX MT4. So what it's going to do is it's just accessing the data that I downloaded. There is actually data built into MT4, but I have also, if I do this relatively seriously, so I actually employ data that comes from various other institutions around the world, so I can compare the performance. I want something that can perform on oil no matter where the data comes from. So all it's doing is, because it's the first time I've run it, it's just accessing the HST files and loading it up. Once it does this, it should then run through relatively quickly. And then I would have to play with those settings to ultimately get something that performs better. So this is the process that would have to happen if I download an EA. So let's say that while this is doing what it's doing, let's let it finish. I'm on the 4-hour time frame, so it's basically looking at this chart here, and it'll probably perform well when it's trending, but when it goes sideways over here, there'll be a lot more losing trades because it'll start buying and then stop and start and stop. So let's see what happens. This is all normal. Right, there we go. Now it's, is it producing trades? Yes, there it is. This looks good. I mean, it only took 4 trades, but look at that. It actually made 1.3% with a 5% drawdown. Okay, I mean, that was fluke, but that's because of the overall moving average system here as well. Okay, so generally speaking, this might be profitable. I wonder, out of interest, if I go back to this point in time, if I make more money than I lose. So I'm going to go back to the 1st of October and just see what happens here. So for fun, just 2018, go back to 10th October and the 1st, and just see how this goes if I run the same system again and see if it does actually enter properly here, or not. I need to see if it's going to execute properly. So let's just see how that goes. It should make more money than it loses. Obviously, this is very early days. These are just default settings. And yeah, there we go. Okay. So it did 2%. It actually did better on the shorter run. If I want to see it actually take those trades, I can go to visual mode and then play it. So run it. Now what it's going to do is actually load up a chart and show me how to do this. This is to introduce you to roughly what it actually means. And you'll see it's very, very slow. It's very sensitive. This is the only thing that's not great about MT4 is that there's a shift from too slow to sometimes too fast. So let's see what happens if I go faster. There we go. And it'll keep going. Now it's taken the trade. And I can put the moving averages in as well to see how it performs. And then I can see how it performs on those trades. So far, not too bad. Okay, there were a couple of little trades there, and then it kind of ultimately headed down. And so there are the trades I can actually see how they're performing. Okay, and then I can just look and see that it is actually behaving the way I would expect it to. And I'll just wait for it to close that trade, and then see how that goes. If there's anything there, because it looks as though it almost didn't even actually take it. It's not taking any trades here, whereas I would expect it to actually take more trades. That's probably this big one here. Let's have a look. All right, there we go. And so that was that trade over there. And so we can see those big systems. Okay, that was the big one right there. Very nice. Okay, that's very cool. That is a very, very, very early starting point using that and testing it. Okay, so that's one way in which I could go about starting that. And if I then liked that, if those settings worked for me and I wanted this to trade that way, then the next step that I would do obviously is then run that. This is the moving average. I would then drag it and drop it onto the chart. All right, and I would usually then have those settings loaded up, make sure that all the settings are loaded up, and usually then run it. At the moment, it's got a very frowny face, which you can't see because I've actually switched off automatic trading. So that is a global green light, red light for any robots on this account. And basically it will trade whatever charts it's on. So if I drop that same robot onto here with the same settings, it would be trying to trade Euro GBP using the settings that I've created for US oil. So I also have that ability to backtest and optimize stuff. I can go through something, for example, and I could say, okay, well, what if my moving period was not 12? What if I looked at every single moving period between 6 and 18? So I could look at 6 and 18 and just do every second one. So it'll look at a moving period of 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18 by an increment of 2. I could say, okay, that's pretty cool. Set it to optimize and then just leave it. And it would go through that process either slowly or quickly, depending on how long it takes to do that. Okay. And so that's known as optimization. The computer would go away and come back and test and come back and say to me, just do this. So that is something that we can use. And these are two that they then tend to provide us with. But we can also go online and find out all about these. And there are some good ones out there. There's also a lot of junk. So we need to be smart about how we do this. And greed can also be an issue there. So if we go to our experts on MT4, I can go and have a look. For example, if I do like something that can automatically do things, I might want something that trades itself. For example, here's a hedging martingale. Okay, so this means martingale is a style of trading, which means to add additional positions to trade out by averaging the position. It's high risk, high return. It means that if the market goes against the trade initially, the system will attempt to trade out of that by adding in additional positions. Okay, so and often it can counter trend trade as well, so it can be very stressful, but it can also make money. So it's like a double-edged sword, basically. So there are some potential returns here. This one, for example, made 150% return, but it had a 38% drawdown over that period. So that's something that if you're not familiar with robots, this is going to be something that will trigger the greed because you'll be like, wow, it makes money, until it doesn't, or you can make it too aggressive. But here's an example. So if I decided to save that EA and bring it and save it into that particular folder. So now what I'm going to do is take that and put it and then copy it into, again, I want to create a folder that is in my experts over here, experts, and I'm going to drag it and drop it in there, or I'm going to create a folder, and again, call this one Atoms EAs, like that. So I'm going to go ahead and save that item in here. I wonder if I can just drag it. Nope, nope, nope. Turns out I can't drag it and drop it. I've just got to go find it. And I'm going to copy it. Go ahead and just copy that and put it into my EA folder. And go back to the platform. And again, you'll see if I just close the indicators here and right-click on Expert Advisors and click refresh, it will update. It'll check the folders again and see if there's anything new there. There's my Atoms EAs, and here is the hedging martingale. Also, what then happens is I can access it in here. I can load it up. So now what I'm going to do, my due diligence, I'm going to check it and see how that goes. And out of interest, I'm going to run it on what was the pair that the user was using. This one in particular was euro dollar, so that's fine. These tend to work very well in markets that go sideways a lot. So if I pick this and I select euro US dollar, which is not in, there it is. Okay, so euro US dollar, and what was the time frame? Relatively important. That was running on the daily. Okay, so I'm going to do it on the 4 hourly. The spread can be 1. Actually, it will be. I'll do it as 5 for now. I'm not going to optimize it. I'm just going to see what happens with the default settings. These are the settings that's there. I'm just going to see what happens with that. And what I'm going to do is, yeah, let's have a look. Let's do 2019. And let's do 1 and just get it past. The funniest thing, so now I'm just going to let it do euro dollar, make sure that it's using that data, which it is, and run it. It's going to do the HST file again and then load it up. Now, this is very exciting, and it's definitely worth, if you're interested in learning how to do this, it's a learnable skill. It's a time-consuming but learnable skill. I am both a manual technical trader and I look at algos, and it's probably simpler to just be one or the other. All right, it probably is, because you could spend your whole life just doing robots and developing them and playing with them, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they're a bit frustrating. So alternatively, I could just be trading from a discretionary purpose, but I do find the robots intriguing, and there's a lot of, and again, the process here, because if you're brand new to it, you might struggle to remember. It seems a bit complex, but actually this is once you've done it 4 or 5 times, it starts to become really easy. There is a certain amount of skill involved in testing something to see if it's going to work, but generally speaking, if that process is done correctly, then the performance will generally match the backtest. And so there's always a lot of people that are doubtful that if something has performed incredibly well in the past, that it won't do that. That really comes down to the EA itself and the backtesting process. There's a thing called curve fitting, where the settings can be optimized almost so much so that the second you run it live, it's been conformed so much that immediately the new conditions are outside of its range. Whereas some systems, such as hedging martingales that I'm showing you now, are actually designed to handle markets organically, but they still have different settings. Okay, and they'll generally be organic because they're more mathematical than patterns. So anyway, point being, that this is very much an interesting feature, and there's a good place to start because they would be rated and there would be feedback on them as well, and advice, and sometimes there's some really valuable advice added to it. The trick with EAs is to not get greedy, because they're like, it's like having a tiger that can ultimately turn on you. And so let's have a look here. I have just downloaded it in front of you, never run it before in my entire life. I'm just seeing how it goes. I want to see if this thing is going to trade. I can see it's taking trades. Let's have a look at the graph. All I've done is I'm not running it on the daily. I'm running it on the 4 hourly. It seems to be performing, okay, and it's kind of come down. And so the overall performance so far is it's down 2% with a 7% drawdown. Okay, that's fine. That's okay for me because that appears as though it's got a stop loss, and maybe it's meant to behave better, and I can optimize it from here. So just because it doesn't perform now doesn't mean that it isn't ultimately a winning EA. So let's just go back to the entry slide and have a look. I just want to go back up this process. There we go. Exploring open source third-party custom indicators and how to install them. Introduction into Expert Advisors, just an introduction. Have your questions answered in real time by myself, and obviously why choose AtFX. So I realized that was very quick, but I wanted you to get a sense of that process. So why choose AtFX? Just because we have a couple of minutes left. AtFX obviously regulated by the FCA in the UK. This is the license number. It's an easy, efficient, secure way to obviously use payments into your account. It's your money. It's segregated, usually segregated, which means that nobody else can access it except you. AtFX is committed to providing obviously competitive pricing for the clients. So good execution, good pricing. And global investors, obviously most widely used trading platform, MT4. Bespoke customer service and trade support for all client trading needs 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. So that's really what you're getting with AtFX. And of course, if you do have any questions, they are in town in the city center. I've been to their offices, obviously, being a client of mine. And these are the contact details. So should you have any questions, of course, you should feel free to contact them. And just be aware, obviously, of the risks as you do this. So trading sensibly is lower risk than trading with too much greed or not enough education. So education is really key. That's all. And all of these skills are generally learnable.